Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. All right, here we go, everyone. Good evening and welcome to the April 5th, 2023 meeting of the Auburn School Committee. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's start with introductions down to my right, please.
Dan Poisson, Ward 5.
Ryan Belknap, Ward 4.
Clarissa Perez Armendariz, Ward 1.
Pam Hart, Ward 2.
Karen Matthew, Ward 3.
Connie Brown, Superintendent.
Pat Gaudier at large.
Pam Albert at large.
Jason Levesque, Mayor.
Jillian Dumais, Student Representative.
Gabriel Desperado, Student Representative.
Mark Conrad, Business Manager.
Sue Doris, Assistant Superintendent.
All right, welcome everyone. Start this evening with a motion for the approval of tonight's agenda, which also includes the minutes from March 15th, March 22nd, as well as a continuing contract renewal for Michelle Gagne, Assistant Principal at East Auburn. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Okay, wait, hang on a second. Brian and Pam, you did that both at once. Pam will put you down for first, second. Okay, Brian for second. Questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion passes. And I won't forget this time. Congratulations, Michelle. Congratulations. All right, let's open it up to public participation. Is there anyone from the public who would like to come and address the school committee this evening? All right, seeing none, I'll close public participation. We will welcome Erin Towns up to the podium. She has a presentation this evening. If you some of you recall, I believe it was a little over a year ago, or Erin will remind us, when we approved a sabbatical. So Erin has come back to tell us what that was all about. So thanks for coming tonight.
Hi, thank you very much. I put together a presentation. Hopefully I can get through it quite quickly. You know, I'm going to read a little bit about it so that I just stay on track. So I would like to begin by thanking the committee for giving me time to speak tonight about my recent sabbatical at the University of Maine during the fall semester studying interdisciplinary education and earth and climate science. Tonight I will be talking about what I learned and how the experience has manifested itself in my classroom. I will feature specific examples from my Arctic Climate Studies course. I have been a teacher in this district for 23 years. The primary purpose of my job as a social studies teacher is to help students develop the ability to make informed and reasoned decisions for the public good as citizens of a culturally diverse, democratic society in an interdependent world. In essence, social studies promotes knowledge of and involvement in civic affairs. My teaching style primarily focuses on relevancy of content to students' personal lives. Everything that we do in the classroom connects to real life. Without this lens, everything means nothing. One of the regions that is of growing importance to Maine's environment, socio-political life, and economy is the Arctic, and it is this topic that has given my students something solid to relate their studies to. So, you know, when I'm talking about the terms interdisciplinary education, this is a philosophy that I fully embrace. Life is interdisciplinary, and so is my classroom. Interdisciplinary instruction is engaging for students because it is structured in a way that moves student learning beyond just learning for learning's sake. The Maine Arctic Studies course elective combines the study of earth and climate science, social studies, and the visual arts. Interdisciplinary literacy is an integral tool for learning in our classroom and is a strategy at the forefront of educational research currently both in Maine and across the nation. Interdisciplinary literacy means learning and practicing reading and writing skills and extending those skills to incorporate literacy into all other subjects. Instruction of interdisciplinary literacy practices is the responsibility, in my opinion, of all educators, not just literacy educators. These practices are fundamental to fostering an environment that goes beyond teaching and learning isolated skills. Interdisciplinary literacy focuses on the larger vision and objective of empowering independent, lifelong learners who think deeply and critically about text. Types of practices that occur in my courses include inquiry-based learning and projects, recognizing perspectives, creating solutions, and taking action. exploring local and connecting to global communities, collaborating with others, utilizing digital resources, and creating and analyzing scientific data. If we take a look at the slides that we have up here, this is just an example of what we just used today in my class, which is a combination of visual arts and then political literacy and then, of course, scientific literacy. So we are looking at the superficial geologic history of Maine itself, namely how glaciers were here and how they shaped our what we see outside every single day. We study a lot about Maine and the Arctic and why it's important, that we understand, like Maine's past and present. And then, of course, our students were able to take walks outside and really put into, using visuals to bring forth what they were learning about. So this is, sort of just like a daily lesson. Arctic topics. Other Arctic topics that relate to Maine include Imeskip, the Icelandic shipping company that moved its national headquarters to Portland, Maine in 2016. The Perry Hansen exploration history. We study a lot about Maine exports, which to the Arctic were worth $900 million in 2021. Arctic infrastructure project projected to be worth over $1 trillion in future needs, and the Portland Museum of Art partnerships, to just name a few. Students have had insights shared with them directly from Senators Angus King and Lisa Murkowski out of Alaska. They were able to hear the president of Iceland at the Arctic Circle Assembly when I zoomed directly in from the country. I have worked with the Portland Museum of Art, the University of Maine. Graduate students and professors are regulars inside my classroom, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, the Maine Port Authority, and numerous local businesses on the Portland waterfront. So this is an example of a student project, final project. It was called the Icebergs in Maine exhibit. This work was created last year by then sophomore Ainsley Watson. The really cool thing, it was also featured this year at the American Geophysical Union's annual conference in Chicago. It was one of their, it was a centerpiece to a presentation that they were giving about using visual arts with high school classrooms. And what we see here is they took pictures of some of the pictures that I caught of icebergs in Greenland. And then we took them for a field trip down to Popham Beach. So behind you, behind these two women who are just out for a nice afternoon with all of their stuff, we see, of course, the badly eroded burn, behind them, and really like kind of pulling that together. It's part of a larger scale project in which we hope to see on the Maine State House floor, hopefully within the next couple of years. For Maine policymakers and any invested people to really think about these combinations and how they affect Maine. So lastly, what brings me to my education, which brings me to my education last semester at University of Maine. I participated in the Polar Trek teacher program in 2022 and traveled to Greenland with a team of glaciologists to study meltwater on the fastest moving glacier in the world. Because our cohort was actually part of the 2020 COVID crew, we were delayed for 2 years. During that time, I started to work with glacier scientists at University of Maine and met who is later to become my advisor, whose name is Dr. Seth Campbell. So this is him, and after working with him for a period of 2 years and trying to get myself educated. I do not possess an undergraduate degree in any form of earth or climate science. So he and his wife both helped me tremendously through that process. And afterwards, after a 2-year span, I was invited by him to, a fully funded master's degree program funded by a grant that funds research about Alaska and Canadian glacier change and connects hundreds of low-income high school students and first-generation college students with polar research. In order to strengthen interdisciplinary strategies and literacy in the classroom, I needed the background in earth and climate sciences, in the area of ice core science. Aside from the essential content knowledge about Earth and climate systems and geologic history of the planet, I was able to study how scientists know what they know, which is one of the questions that I get in my classroom on almost a daily basis. Really, how do you know? I was able to study most of what we studied up there was about ice core science. For those of you that are new to ice core science, the way that one example that I've shared with my students, and they really kind of liked this story and these different visuals, is ice is melted down in a melter disc. That's what you see on the left-hand side. The outside ring filters impure ice that was in contact with the ice drill when they were drilling the ice core. The inside ring collects glacier water that is tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of years old, depending on where it was coming from. The oldest continuous ice core records to date extend 123,000 years in Greenland and 800,000 years in Antarctica. Ice cores contain information about past temperature and about many other aspects of the environment. Water is put through a machine called a mass spectrometer. Spectrometers can read isotopic content found in meltwater. Isotopes are important for technology and applications to society. Aside from applications related to political policy regarding environmental law, adaptation, and mitigation planning for cities, they are also important for agriculture, food processing, pest control, archaeology, and medicine. They help scientists know what the planet was like in the past and what it may look like in the future using scientific modeling. Part of my work with Dr. Campbell and the UMO geophysics team is to design and run programs for high school students during the summer on the Juneau ice fields in Alaska. These are interdisciplinary exploration lessons and opportunities incorporating remote sensing technologies, glacier science, earth and climate science, indigenous culture, and economics. Edward Little is an upward bound school, and the state of Maine will be sending a delegation of students to this program. Edward Little High School upward bound students will be eligible for this opportunity starting next year. So lastly tonight, I extend a heartfelt thanks to all of you school committee members, Superintendent Brown, my principal, Scott Anier, and all of my EL colleagues, especially those of the Social Studies Department who offered support in this endeavor. I owe science teacher Brandy McFadden a huge thank you for answering every single question that I have had over the years regarding science. She helped me tremendously. The beauty of Edward Little is that we have a hugely supportive team and family, and I'm grateful every day to know and work alongside them. Most importantly, I would also like to thank my students for making my job and life exciting, interesting, and fun. There is literally no better job in the world, frankly. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Erin. Does anyone have any questions for Erin? Yeah, Pat? Or kudos?
I don't have a question really, but you took most of those pictures, didn't you?
I did.
I was just about to say that. I recognize your work there. It's beautiful. Erin, thank you so much for coming. I will say I understood as a literacy specialist, I understood about 20% of what you were talking about. So the rest, I will assume, was just an amazing experience. Let's leave it that way. So I'm very glad you got to participate in that and are carrying it forward to our students at EL. So thank you very much for that. All right, moving on. Student committee's rep report. I don't believe we have one this evening. Correct me if I'm wrong. No. Okay. All right. Superintendent's report. Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairperson Matthew. I have a couple of items for the school committee tonight. The first is I shared in your packet copies of my testimony for two pieces of legislation that the Auburn School Department asked to have submitted this year. The first was LD 1053, and this would allow public schools to use what are called activity buses. You may have noticed that some of our private school colleagues, daycares, the city recreation department, all are able to use activity buses. And if you look at the statute, which I did, the entity prohibited from using these are public schools, and that didn't sit well with me. And so working with Mayor Levesque and Representative Brakey, we were able to submit legislation to have that changed. And so Todd Sampson and I testified in front of the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee last week, and we'll see how it goes. They seem to be interested, but as politics works, sometimes things don't always follow the trajectory you think they should. But it was a good effort, and I am proud to say I was from Auburn, and that if this change is made, it will be impactful throughout the state. The second piece of testimony is LD 725. This was a product of a discussion with Scott and Air, Melissa and I, about a year or so ago, and it deals with students who complete their high school diploma in 4 years through adult education. They are considered non-completers or dropouts. And that didn't sit well with us. We think that those kids work, or those folks work just as hard, perhaps harder, if you've ever been to adult ed graduation. And Chairperson Matthew, I know you and I have been there, as has the mayor. It's easily one of the most moving experiences you will ever attend. And to say that those students are not completers just didn't sit well with us. That hearing, and Melissa can speak to it if she chooses, she was one of the people who testified as well, raised a lot of questions from the adult ed committee about money. And if the students complete through the regular ed program, would that in fact take money away from adult education? And I didn't know the answer to that. So we'll see. They will both bills will have work sessions probably in the next 2 weeks or so, and as I learn what the outcome is, I will report back. But again, I think that it's a good example of how an issue at a local level can bubble up, be taken to our local legislators, and then a bill filed. So, and I want to thank the mayor again for your help with that, because you were on the ground floor getting those things in. So health insurance rates. So we have some good news. We budgeted 15% for health insurance, and this is in the memo that I included in your packet from Friday. And so that's a good news because health insurance rates came in less than that, and we were able to save $507,598 from the budget. And so that line has been reduced accordingly. That was very good news. I'm very pleased that we didn't need to go in the other direction. In other words, underestimated the amount of increase. That's always tempting when you're trying to put together a tough budget. But it's to our favor this year, so that's good news. Hiring for 23, oh, I should pause before I roll on here. Any questions about health insurance rates? Okay, so hiring for 23-24, I have asked our administrators and our HR staff to get going with advertising and hiring. I think that we want to be out early in what I anticipate will be a competitive labor market, and we want to start filling positions as soon as possible. So you will begin seeing, possibly as early as May, candidates who will be hired for next school year, which is the 23-24 school year. So that will be coming forward. General fund budget. So there are a couple of other budget documents in your packet, and they include what I call the revenue sheet and my budget memo. And with the chair's permission, I'd just like to touch on some of the changes that have been made. So pursuant to the memo, we received from the state of Maine additional general purpose aid. And again, as with the health insurance, I'm glad this was in our favor. The state made a mistake in general purpose aid calculation of what I think is some size of $40-odd million. And that meant that many districts received additional general purpose aid subsidy, as we did. So ours was just over $699,000. That is also reflected in the revenue sheet that has been included in your packet. And then, having listened to committee meetings over the last 4 or 5 Wednesdays, I took the liberty of adding some things back. The first put back, and as I went through this in my memo, pertained to out-of-district special education placements. The Maine Department of Education proposed a rule change to Chapter 101, which is special education, and it pertained to the calculation of how we pay for out-of-district placements. And the change proposed was moving from an attendance model, which essentially means that you pay for the days the kids go, to a calendar model, which means that you pay for the student's placement irrespective of whether they attend or not. And the change that had been proposed was being proposed as emergency legislation, which meant it would go faster, it would not have a public hearing, it would go into effect this year, which would be 22-23, and impact the current rates. And there was a lot of pushback against that from superintendents and school board members because, as you know, the budget for this year is already set, and it would have been difficult to take on that cost in 22-23. The way school departments calculate their out-of-district placements was greatly debated, and I think a lot of people said, we want to be able to give input, and we need to stop pushing this through. So they tapped the brakes, and they will have a public hearing, but I think I would be disingenuous if I did not tell you that I believe this is going to go into effect for fiscal year 24. The reason for this, and I'm not sure I believe this, but they say that there is imminent harm to the special purpose private schools, all of them, because they don't have the revenue to support their operations. I think that may be true for some of them, but I'm not sure you could take a broad brush and say that's true for all of them. But that's the model that's going forward. So to be prudent, and I talked to Laura and Mark, we think we need to increase our out-of-district line by another $250,000. For those of you who have been on the committee for a while, you may remember that that line used to go pretty seriously in the red 4 or 5 years ago. And it has the potential to do that again, because not only are they moving to a calendar model, if that goes through, and I think it will, but they're also raising their prices. So to give you an example, we send a fair number of students to Margaret Murphy. 6%, which is the increase is being discussed, is $187,000, Laura. So $157,000. So it's significant to our budget. And I don't want to come back to you in December and tell you that that line is deep in the red. So that's the first putback that I'm recommending, or increase. The second is listening to the discussion on the 22nd of March and the importance of supporting classroom positions. I have restored the ed techs that I took out. I also heard an interest in first team baseball. That was the team that had the numbers to justify putting that back. And as an aside, talking with the city's recreation department, they are going to take over, if you might, our fall cheering program and supervise that and run it as a pep club. So it's a great example of the collaboration and the good relationship that we have with the City of Auburn, that they have stepped forward and are willing to do that. And then the last item, I think during the budget discussions, we've talked a number of times about our difficulty in trying to hire a substance misuse counselor. So what I think we'll do, with your approval, is try to come at it from another way. And this is actually Mark's idea, so I want to give him full credit for suggesting this. And it is to, instead of having this as a position covered by the teacher's agreement, to run it as a contracted service. We do this with other contracted services. This will allow the entity that we contract with to bill insurance or private pay providers. And we think that with that hybrid model, someone can really make a go of it. So we're going to explore that, and I'm recommending putting back $50,000 as part of that putback. All of those costs are reflected in the sheets that you have in front of you. So as a component of that, though, what I am recommending is that the entirety of the general purpose aid be used to offset or mitigate what I call the local ask. So that has been dropped from what it was to now 3.3%. And the other funds here really come from the health insurance savings. So that brings our budget to $55,697,399, and the local portion would drop to $625,621, or 3.3%. And I'd be happy to take questions about those recommendations.
Any questions of Dr. Brown on her recommendations, Pam?
The first thing is, why did they make it an emergency? Is it because they said certain places weren't lucrative?
It would be speculation on my part why the department does anything, and try not to be,
That is
a
really great way to just put that.
So I don't know. I think what they put in their memo was that the impetus for this was that there was imminent harm, that they were in imminent harm of closing, and students would be, you wouldn't be able to place students.
I'd also like to make a comment that I really appreciated the work that you put into this. And you listened to what parents, what we had to say. And I think it's a great use of the money that we found. And I just want to thank you for really putting a lot of thought into this and listening. And I think you did a great job, and I'm all for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't say I had a lot of help. So this is the recommendation of the entire administrative team in my office, and a lot of thoughtful people giving their considered opinion. So I just got to talk about it.
Any other questions, Pat, or comments?
I have a question about the activity buses. If by some miracle that law is passed, do we have some of these buses would qualify, or what would happen?
Right now, as a public school, we are prohibited from buying or operating them. We don't have them. If the law passes, then Mr. Conrad and I will look creatively at how we might move that goal forward.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Jason?
Yeah, so the city council and myself are used to having the city manager, in this case the superintendent, presenting their best and final budget to the organization or the body, whether it be the school board, which we just sat through several weeks of meetings, and then hence to the city council, which you both did so well. And that final budget is the budget pre any type of amendments that might be made by the body versus amendments that are made by administration. So what I'm concerned about is that the $250,000 for the emergency legislation has to be taken off the shelf. That's a positive reaction to something that may or may not happen. We understood that. That is easily understood because it's a third-party action that we have to unfortunately react to. Same thing happens with us on the municipal side. But what I'm hearing now is that administration edited the budget, added back in once more monies came in. So the first budget that was presented was not your best budget. That concerns me. This has to be now if you would, explained to the city council before their vote and action on your budget. Everybody understands the amendment process, mind you, made by the boards. That happens before, but not the administration edits.
So if I might respond to that. Absolutely. So the committee has not taken a position formally on the school department's budget. The public hearing is scheduled on the 19th, and at that point, I would assume that the committee would take input from people interested in the budget, as in the current recommendation by the administration. The school committee is scheduled to vote on the school department budget May 3rd. So that action has yet to be taken.
Do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, the date for the city council to approve the budget is, do you have it handy? I don't have it in front of me. That's May 16th?
That sounds about right.
I believe so. I believe so. It's shortly after our vote on the budget.
May 15th.
Yep. So right now it's the superintendent's budget, which is still the superintendent's budget. It's not the school committee budget yet. She's still working with her team and her staff to figure out monies have come, monies have gone. We've cut this, we've cut that, and listening to some of the feedback here, I think, is where we've kind of arrived here.
Yeah, and please don't take me the wrong way, but we're just used to looking at, if a budget was presented with an increase in the mill rate, yes, as everybody's going to be happy with a decrease in what your ask is, and a 3.3% increase is probably, I would wager money, might be the lowest increase of a municipality of like size in the state of Maine this year, from the school side. Municipal side is going to be about the same too. So combined, we're looking at probably the lowest tax increases in the state of Maine for a city. That's great. But we're going to have to go back and have that conversation with the council before they set the final amount.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yep. Agreed. Sure.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the budget that you set was based on, well, without the knowledge of how much the insurance was going to be. So in order to set a correct budget, we needed to find that out. So you set the best budget that you could come up with before you had
Your numbers.
your numbers. So I don't know how that
No.
could have been set up.
It's not quite out. I mean, if that was the case, then the city council would say, this is all the money you have to create a budget with, before you created the budget. You create the budget and then ask for the money needed as an increase in the levy or decrease, depending, in order to satisfy with the best budget to accomplish the superintendent's goals as dictated by the committee. So whereas the state funding formula is a significant percentage, it's not the cap, if you would. So you could, other schools, look at Lewis and I think, is at a 19% increase in the levy. So that, it's not, you can't just do a budget waiting on the final numbers, because frankly, you never really get the final numbers. They're all guesstimates anyways. And you can always ask for more, hence why the increase in the levy.
So if that's the case, then how can the city council be told one budget before we have all the information and then say that we didn't give them the best?
So is our timeline
best.
off then? That's something to think about.
So she gave an amount, and now it's different because we're basing it on the insurance and the insurance numbers. So should we have waited until we got the insurance numbers to present it to the city council? And that way, because I don't think anything was done maliciously.
Actually, well, no, and that's why I proposed, and the chair agreed, that we wouldn't have this conversation until after April 7th, which was then, or April 6th, the proposed date that you would have the insurance numbers back. You just got the insurance numbers back
Sooner.
very, very much sooner. So we did want to wait and hold until we got those numbers, which we're here now. So that's the case. And the school, I mean, nobody anticipated the state, which is kind of ironic, not being able to do math.
All right, any other questions for Dr. Brown? Comments on budgets, anything? All right, thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Brown.
Thank you.
No chairperson's reports. Mr. Mayor, city council update. Did you wrap it in with your comments, or do you want to add on?
Lobster Festival, May 6th, 1 to 9.
Yes, I
Great
saw
times.
the trailer. I saw the trailer.
You saw the trailer?
I
Yeah,
did.
May is for Mainers.
I did. I saw the trailer. Thank you. Hi, welcome. All right, moving on. Committee reports are all there. Any questions for any of the committee reports? Agendas are there. Minutes are there. Sure. Yep, Pat?
On the DEI minutes, there is no civil rights team at the high school. Is that correct?
Okay.
That's too bad.
Any other questions about any of the?
I do want to say that there's going to be an ELHS fundraising committee meeting on Monday. Is it April 10th?
Sounds right.
Yes, April 10th at
It is Monday.
6 o'clock.
Okay, perfect. We'll add that to the ticker at the bottom. Okay, all right, moving on. If we're ready to move on. Old business. All right, let's move on to this. All right, I entertain a motion for a second reading and approval of policy AUB JLCDB, naloxone in schools. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Kat, thank you. Brian, questions, comments about that one?
I guess I just want to continue to advocate that I think that more people than nurses should be able to administer this. I know that, and I read in your minutes that you had discussed this, and I appreciate that. And you took, again, the public's and what I had said to heart, and I appreciate that. And I agree that this is a great stepping stone. My question is, okay, so it's a stepping stone. Now, how do we, like, I know everybody agreed that this is a good first step. How do we get to the second step in order to train people? Want to be trained, not those who don't want to, just those who want to.
I think in order for them to really start having that conversation, first this policy needs to be approved, right? If we do one step at a time. I think a little bit of cart before the horse.
And then one other question, well, that's why I was asking, because I knew we were going to do this, and that's great, but I was just wondering how we go about increasing. The other question I have is, in the policy, it says, any person trained may administer naloxone to any person suspected of experiencing an opiate-related overdose. Now, I'm assuming that you mean nurses. Okay. And I think that this is an amazing thing that we're going to be doing. I think it's something that is, well, of course, I'm a medical person, but I think it's a pretty simple way of saving someone's life. And I think that even the fact that children are going to see people that they trust and that they see every day actually could save their mother or their father or save another student, I think it's just a huge plus, and I appreciate all the work that you've done, the committee has done on this. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? right, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Thank you. Next is entertain a motion for a second reading and approval of policy AUB-EGAD copyright compliance. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Can I have a second? Marissa, thank you. Questions, comments on this policy? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you all. Next, call for a motion, second read and approval of policy AUB-EGAD-R, copyright compliance administrative procedure. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Pam?
Second.
All right, Pam, change that to Renee. Pam Albert. Pam Hart, second. Questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. And last, for old businesses, I'll entertain a motion for a second reading and approval of policy AUB-EHB records management. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Brian. Thank you, Pam. Questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, moving on to new business. First is entertain a motion to approve the principal bid for ELHS classroom and office furniture and equipment to WB Mason at a cost of $1,070,079. So this is for classroom and office equipment proposals. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Brian. Questions, comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Next is a motion to award a contract to ABC Moving and Storage for high school relocation services at a base bid of $137,550. You did have the RFP as part of your packet as well. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Have a second. Thank you, Pat. Questions, comments on this one? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Wonderful. Motion passes. So far, we're halfway there to getting new furniture and getting it moved into that new building. We're halfway there, people. All right, next is a motion to appropriate up to $95,000 from capital improvement funds for the school department's share of the reconstruction costs of the East Auburn tennis courts. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian.
Second.
Thank you, Pam. Questions, comments on that one? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Next is a first read of policy AUB-EFC, free and reduced price food services. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pam. Pam, I'll put Pam Hart down. Any questions, comments on that one? Yep.
I just have a question, of course.
Go ahead.
So it says here that in the red, like a teacher who believes a child is not being nourished, they can opt to put them in the free lunch even if the family has not filled out the proper documentation. The question I have is, it shall be the policy of our schools that when school lunch is desired, payment is expected on that day or advanced for pupils not eligible for free lunch. Now, what if there was a child that came up and wanted free lunch, but parents forgot to pay, or can they still participate and get a free lunch?
They can get a free lunch, yes.
And they're not going to be, I did also see that if there is an issue, that it's resolved with the parents or guardian and not the child, because I have heard stories that sometimes children get shamed, and I don't want that to happen.
That's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Next is a first reading of policy AUB-EFE, competitive food sales, sales of foods in competition with the school food service program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Pat, thank you, Brian. Questions, comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Next is a first reading of policy AUB-EB, environmental and safety program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Pam, thank you, Brian. Questions, comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. Wow, policy committee was really busy the other night. Next is a motion for first reading of policy AUB-EBAA, chemical hazards. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Brian, do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Next, I'll call for a motion for first reading of policy AUB, EBCA, did I say that? EBCA, yes, Comprehensive Health and Safety Emergency and Management Plan. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Pat, you want to go second? Questions, comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. And last but not least, I'll call for a motion on first reading of policy AUB, EBCB, Emergency Evacuation Drills. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Have a second?
Second.
Go for it. All right, questions, comments on that one? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, upcoming meetings. Pam, you also, Dr. Brown, can we add April 10th to that one, please? The fundraising, EL fundraising committee.
It'll also be located at the Edward Little Library, 6 o'clock, April 10th, Monday.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Any other meetings not on here? Anyone is noticing? I think we've got them. Future agenda items, requests for information. All right, seeing none, I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Have a motion, please.
So moved.
Brian, I'll take yours. Pam, I'll take you for a second. All those in favor? And we are adjourned, ladies and gentlemen, 6:41. Thank you all so much. If you celebrate Easter, happy Easter. I believe it's also the start of Passover. There's a lot. So happy celebrating, is it? I think so.